Welcome into the 7th episode of the TerpTalk Young Terp podcast presented by Viener Consulting. This is your host, Mason the Intern Viener.
And your co-host, Jordan Viener.
And today on the Young Terp podcast, we will have Wayne Viener on to discuss the whole Maryland, Penn State, older versus younger generation thing in regards to a football lost recruit in P.J. Mustipher. And then we will continue with our Maryland football previews with Maryland at Ohio State and Maryland versus Northwestern.
So, from TerpTalk's main radio show, here he is, Mr. Wayne Viener.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. I'm in the Tidewater region today, and so many Maryland recruits are down here. And with all the Air Force bases, naval bases, etc. here, the talent level of the high schools is really as high as the Maryland recruiters have it marked. And, of course, Maryland had picked up last week a great receiver from this area. Mason, who do we bring in as a football commit?
Well, we brought in Daryl Jones, the receiver from down there by you, I guess, for this podcast. And it's just a big deal how well Maryland's been doing in recruiting as of late.
Especially in the Tidewater region, considering they brought in Mike London to recruit the Tidewater region, and then he left, and we're still getting the guys.
DJ Durkin and the rest of that staff, boy, do they recruit. They are so good at this. But one guy they didn't get is P.J. Mustipher. It was between Maryland and Penn State. I thought it was getting to be a 50-50 thing, and then he picks Penn State, and boy, did that got to me.
Well, how
do you guys take it?
Well, he was considered a Penn State lean for most of his recruiting. Only recently we thought we might be pulling even with our recruiting push, but it just didn't happen, is what it looks like.
What? You and the word lean, that's just something that, it's like it's a lean, but Maryland seems to win a lot of guys that were leaned a different way. They seem to come up big in the late recruiting game a lot, but it just didn't happen this time. And for me, it's not that big of a deal. Maryland signed the Gaddies last year and Cam Spence. It's just, you can never have enough linemen, but P.J. Mustipher probably made the move for him to play sooner than he would have at Maryland.
Okay, so there's two things there. First of all, because you haven't been following this as long as I have, the overarching theme is I hate Penn State more than you guys do. But underneath that, the fact that you say that Maryland, with these leans, gets so many kids, for my entire life, till the past 2 years, that hasn't been true. Maybe during the Jerry Claiborne years, but to hear you just expect we're going to get kids by the way you say that is shocking to me, and I love to hear it. And we also got Austin Fontaine, which is one of Jordan's favorites as a defensive lineman. But of course we needed him. This is a DMV, UMD. We've been doing well, but man, to lose him to Penn State, it's a big rival to me. Jordan, you saw how I acted when we beat Penn State up there, but it just doesn't translate to you, does it?
Well, I remember when we made the trek up to Penn State in Halloween, it was like a mythical experience to you. It was a huge deal that we were playing Penn State again, and then we beat them for the first time since, 1960-something, I think. But it was a landmark watershed moment for you, and to me it was cool. I don't like them, but to you it was one of the biggest deals I've ever seen you have for a sporting event.
Mason, what do you think? You were there.
Well, I take it as a bigger deal than Jordan just because I'm more passionate about Maryland football, which is where Maryland-Penn State is a big thing to Maryland fans. It's just, I don't see it as big a thing as the whole older Maryland generation does. It's not just you. It's on every Maryland message board and every Maryland thing that the old generation just absolutely despises of Penn State.
Oh, it's as big as hating Duke. Absolutely. I dislike Duke and Penn State, and probably Penn State as much than any other two teams. Most of you know I'm a Redskin fan. I dislike Penn State more than I hate the Dallas Cowboys. It's just been my arch trouble. They always, to me, acted like they were superior, and maybe it's because every time we played them, they won. So you got to win a game before it's a rivalry. I understand that it can't be a rivalry if you play them 30-something times in a row and you lose 30-something times in a row. but DJ Durkin is going to even this up. So what more do you need to know about it from me to make you feel the passion?
Well, there's a lot of teams we lose to a lot, though. That's the thing I don't understand. I'm trying to remember. We lost to Florida State a lot. We lost to Virginia Tech a lot recently. But nothing is the same to you. I don't understand why. This rivalry
he doesn't understand. Jordan just does not understand why, to most Maryland fans, new and old, more the old than the new, but he just doesn't grasp that this team is just so much more to the Maryland fans.
Who's at this team there?
I guess I have been watching football games with you for about 19 years, and if you don't have this yet, I don't know how to get it across to you, but I think Mason's word despise, absolutely despise these people. That is the only football game that when we won, I cried ever.
Yeah, I remember that. It just doesn't, I don't understand. We played them 3 times in my lifetime. I don't understand how Mason does understand. Let's go with that. We played them 3 times. I'm not exaggerating. We've played them 3 times since you've been born. We've lost 2 of those games. It's not, I don't understand. I don't understand now.
Well, Mason is a football guy. Mason goes to these football practices. We were at media day the other day. I missed the open practice today because I'm out on the Tidewater side, but we'll get to one of these in the next week or so. But we went to media day. The football players would walk around with their helmets off, and Mason knows who these guys are, and they know who he is. He's much more tied in because football has better accessibility than basketball. And unfortunately, lacrosse is up there, but unfortunately, basketball access isn't as good as the football access. So when you're tied in, and you know that almost every kid that's a Terp was probably recruited by Penn State at some point. So it is our natural rival. To me, it's our natural rival. I don't know, but obviously Jordan doesn't feel that. But I know Mason's starting to get it. And once we play them a few more times and beat them a couple times, it'll probably be more apparent. But moving on.
Wait, I just want to say one more thing. I always felt like our natural rival was West Virginia more than anybody. And I know we're not playing them for a while, but it just always felt more natural to me. Penn State always seemed to recruit at a different level than us. West Virginia was more in our wheelhouse. Now that seems to be changing, but why didn't the same thing happen with West Virginia?
It's just
it was close. I will give you, it was close for all those years we played West Virginia. It was a big game. I remember West Virginia being highly thought of. They came in here with Jeff Hostetler as the quarterback, who goes on to play for the New York Giants. He was a Redskin for a while. They had some other guys like Oliver Luck, who's a big-time athletic director at West Virginia, and his son is Andrew Luck, the quarterback for the Colts. Huge games. This is one of the few games where Maryland used to sell soft drinks in cups with lids on them, and the one side of the student section would throw full 32-ounce sodas. At the other side, there were soda bombs. I mean, it was a big deal, but it wasn't Penn State. And the reason, I believe, is because of the attitude of Penn State fans. West Virginia fans don't particularly act as though, once again, just my opinion, but that's what sports radio is about. My opinion is the Penn State group just act like they were better than the Maryland group. You see some of that with Carolina. All 3 of us have been to Maryland-Carolina basketball, football, soccer matches. And you sit there and go, you can just tell what the basis of that rivalry is.
No, I will concede I understand that, because when Maryland played Penn State and Baltimore last year, actually 2 years ago now, those were the nicest people. Those fans weren't the greatest fans, football watching buddies around.
All right. Well, I'm not here to worry about anymore what they think. I obviously don't like Penn State. I didn't want to lose Mustapher to Penn State. If you lost them to somebody else, sure, I can understand we don't get every recruit we go after. But let me throw this back to Mason and his impressions of what Rick Court and that weight and conditioning program has done to the Maryland football linemen.
So, if you watched Big Ten Network's segment day on Maryland football, you saw Damian Prince and Derwin Gray, who we both had on TerpTalk, with their shirts off, and these people have grown a lot. Like a ridiculous amount in the past 2 years with DJ Durkin and Rick Court. And maybe they'll step up and really become huge Big Ten offensive linemen this year. Or maybe there's a phrase that you like to use for this stuff, that they look like Tarzan and play like Jane, but I really hope that's not the case, and this strength and conditioning program has gotten the Terps offensive line to its max.
They look like Big Ten players now.
I think they are Big Ten players. When Maryland plays a team with a winning record, the offense scored about 10, 11 points a game last year. When Maryland played a team with a losing record, the offense scored about 30 points a game last year. So you get to 6-6, they finished 6 and 7 because when they played somebody who wasn't up to their level, they steamrolled them. But when they played to somebody who was at their level or above, Maryland got steamrolled. Most of the kids are going to play the majority of the minutes, now have a season of Big Ten experience. I think a lot of the freshmen are going to play. Mason, you heard DJ talk. Do you think a lot of freshmen are going to play?
Well, I don't think this was as much from DJ as it was for the actual players themselves. They said, if you go back to what the offensive lineman said, the best 5 guys that the coaching staff believes in are going to be on the field regardless of how long they've been there. And I think that's just the will to win from this team and coaching staff is they don't care if you're a freshman or a redshirt senior. If you're better than the next guy, you're going to be out there on the field.
Well,
Jordan, is that a good philosophy, or do you think they should keep some of these red shirts around? Keep some of these freshmen as red shirts?
Well, I know pro football is a different game, but this is an interesting idea that the Redskins had a couple days ago, which is on the defensive line under Jim Tomsula now, the Redskins are abandoning the idea of units. They're going to just mix and match players to fit whatever they want to do on that play to try to keep everybody fresh and keep the line working at max efficiency. I think it may be an idea worth doing on a defensive line as deep as Maryland has.
On the defense or offense?
On the defense.
Look, Maryland's defense, boy, they gave up a lot of big plays. And when they were overpowered, they didn't come back. It's not like they had a couple bad series. We traveled part of the country and saw them, and the defense just could not stand up in the second half when the other team was better. At some point, might be this year, might be next year, defense has to be able to play at that level. You can't, although DJ's still on his honeymoon with Maryland, how many games can you lose? 60-3. Before people start to wonder if you got the right guy.
I believe the answer to that is generally not a lot. The DJ has this way about him that everybody in the Maryland fandom believes that this program is building something, and it's not only the Maryland fans, it's all of the sports writers. Everybody thinks that this program is on the path to greatness.
I see Mason's point that I believe, and I am known as a Maryland football naysayer, but I do believe DJ Durkin is doing the right thing, but I see the other side of the coin, which is people don't have patience past, I'm going to give him 3 years of getting blown out. I'll give him 1 more year past this one. After that, you start to wonder. You almost have to.
Well,
you're talking about something that didn't happen. He isn't going to get. Okay, I will concur. If he's still getting blown out 3 or 4 years from now, something's wrong. But the level of talent, Mason, you follow this stuff. You follow it more than I do. Is the talent level on the way up?
Definitely the talent level's on the way up. But as I say, and every time they get a 3-star recruit, those are guys are building the foundation that these guys want. So I see the problems if they keep on getting blown out to be in the next 3 years because they're getting the guys that they want to get. So that is where your problems are going to come in because they have the guys that they want, and if they continue to get blown out, there has to be a change in philosophy.
Well, I think the defense, the fact that they have a coordinator that some people wonder, what's the defensive coordinator's name?
Andy Boo.
Yeah, that Boo part comes back a little bit. But I think you're going to have to let them upgrade the talent and then see if Andy Boo and your Walt Bell on the offensive side can make the magic happen.
Well,
I'm going to leave you guys on the quarterbacks and throw it back to your standard young Terp format. I have read that Kasim Hill from St. John's College and before that at Gilman, who transferred high schools, seems to be the real deal. And it's really close between Piggy and Kasim Hill, and you can throw everybody else in that mix. I'm surprised. I thought it would be Caleb Henderson. If it's really close between Kasim Hill as a real true freshman and a Piggy, which one are you going to play?
I'm going to go with, I'll start off and say Kasim Hill would be my starter. I think that this guy has brought a lot of excitement to the Maryland football program, and I would play him just because he's there. They think that he has the footwork that Walt Bell wants. He has enough running that he's just the guy that they wanted for this system, not a guy like a Piggy who they got at the end of a recruiting cycle just because they needed a quarterback.
I would say I like Piggy a lot. I think he has high upside, and I don't want to play Kasim Hill right now. I think it's too early. I want to shield him, let him grow a little bit before we actually throw him in the Big Ten. I'd play Piggy for the future. I would save Kasim Hill until he's ready.
All right, though that was Jordan Viener, intern Mason. This is Wayne Viener, the Young Terp podcast on the TerpTalk network. Still talking Terp football. So my thought is that you're going to play the young guy over the old guy. If it's even and you can get a 4-year starter out of Hill, if it's truly even, you go ahead and play Hill and let him play the 3 or 4 years until somebody beats him out. But I see a danger with everything still being in flux that if you throw them out there and they start to lose my mythical 60-3 games, that you ruin the kid's confidence.
Well,
Do you think that, I mean, you play high school sports. You're not old enough to play college sports yet, but is losing somebody's confidence like that a big deal?
yeah, and that brings me back to a few years ago at the lacrosse Final Four when we were watching Loyola and North Carolina. Bruce really wanted Loyola to take out their goalie, Jake Stover, because he was afraid that it was going to ruin his whole career, that he was getting blown out by Carolina. So it's the philosophy of the coach and the kid that makes that a big factor.
All right.
Jordan, any insight?
No, I think that's it. So,
Okay, well, I want to thank you guys for having me on. I'd love to do this again sometime. Of course, football season is a great time to do it. I expect that the whole team will be on tour, the whole TerpTalk podcast team, be on tour possibly next week. In Ohio, University of Wisconsin, possibly Notre Dame. So I know you guys will cook up something good for the road. And, of course, I'd like to thank my home company, Viener Consulting, Viener Fourgates. If you need help with your website, your marketing, point of sale, just computer help, call Viener Fourgates. You can reach us at 301-251-2900. Guys, thanks for having me on, and we'll talk soon.
I'll see you later.
And
Okay,
that
bye-bye.
was Wayne Viener from the rest of the TerpTalk network. And next week we're going to actually have a lot of interesting videos as we make our trip across the country to drop Jordan off. And we're looking to get some good content out during that.
Yeah, we're gonna hopefully visit Notre Dame. We have some issues with our car situation, so we'll see how that happens. We will see Wisconsin, though, and of course we'll see NDSU, the Alabama of the FCS, I want to point out. So I'm excited.
And let's move on to the next segment here on the Young Terp podcast. So, Jordan, what's it going to be?
Well, before we start the next segment, I want to bring something up that broke today. Maryland, officially by the NCAA, has the 7th largest attendance for basketball on average in America. So that's pretty good.
Well, yeah, but there were some teams on that list before the Terps that really surprised me, like Creighton.
And Wisconsin. I mean, you don't expect some of these teams, but, the Terps placed top 10 for the second year in a row. That's really good. And Maryland, 2 years ago, Melo's freshman year, we had the 25th ranked attendance in America. We jumped to 5th the year before. There's an article on TerpTalk.com that wrote about this, but our attendance is good and hopefully keeps trending in the right direction.
So let's talk about a game that's been a blowout recently, and that is Maryland at Ohio State.
Well, Maryland, there's not much to talk about here, but I'll just blow through what I have written down.
Well, before that, the only game that the Terps have even gotten close in was the one at Columbus, which was Randy Etzel's last game.
Yeah, I remember that. Perry Hills had a great game, but it just wasn't enough to carry the Terps. So Big Ten, let's be honest here. Ohio State's probably the best team in the Big Ten, if not the country. And there's just not much to say here. A lot of people have been going undefeated through the regular season, being a playoff team again. If you look at the roster, they got J.T. Barrett returning at quarterback, a Heisman contender. Mike Weber had a 1,000-yard rushing season last year, who looks to have another great year. The only weak spot in the team might be receivers, where they lost their top 3 contributors from last season. But even there, with Urban Meyer recruiting, they have so much talent flooding into the roster, it doesn't even matter.
And that's just what power teams like Ohio State do. They just rake in huge amounts of talent. And if you look at their defense, I mean, they're just loaded with NFL talent. They have Nick Bosa, the brother of Joey Bosa on the D-line. And if you just look at their defensive backs, they lost guys like Malik Hawker to the NFL, but it just doesn't seem to matter for teams like Ohio State.
Yeah, their defense is loaded, even though they lost so much on... That's another spot Maryland might be able to expose, although I kind of doubt it, is their defensive backfield kind of lacks. They lost Marshawn Lattimore and Malik Hooker, 2 first-round draft picks. But, even up front, they have, in addition to Nick Bosa, who's a great talent from what I've seen, they have returning defensive lineman of the year, Taquan Lewis. They just have so much. This game's going to be a blowout, let's be honest, Mason.
Well, both co-offensive coordinators have left the program, and their co-defensive coordinator and linebacker coach, Luke Fickell, has gone to Cincinnati to be the head coach. So there is turnover, but with big programs like this that succeed, there's always turnover. And this game, I have to agree with you, is going to be a blowout.
Yeah, we just said that actually with Wayne, there's not much. We almost assume this game's going to be 60-3. We don't compete with these guys yet. Maybe we will one day, but my official Jordan Viener certified score for this game is 56-7, Ohio State in the horseshoe.
Well, if anybody is counting, I have the Terps flying high into this one at 4-0, but I see them coming out of Columbus 4-1. I got Ohio State 56-10.
A little bit more optimistic there, I can see. So, yeah, we said it's
3 points more optimistic, really? You always judge me.
You're putting a lot of pressure on Adam Green there with those 3 points.
Well, that's a spot of dispute for the Terps this year.
Yeah, actually.
The other kicker being Matt Shinsky, who kicked the Terps' longest field goal in now probably about 2 years of 41 yards, because Adam Green just hasn't shown the leg power to make kicks that long. So that's an interesting spot going into camp for the Terps.
Really got to miss Brad Craddock these days. So let's go on to a more competitive game, home against Northwestern.
So, before we get into this, the best case scenario for Maryland football this year is probably 8-4. Winning their first 4 games, beating Northwestern, Indiana, Rutgers, and then beating one of the games that you don't think they're going to win, most likely Michigan State.
Yeah, I could probably go with that. I think it's unlikely. I think Maryland is probably going to get closer to 5-7, 6-6 this year. But I see that is a best case scenario, yes.
That's why I call it the best case scenario. But this is, if you look at the games that they should win or competed, after the Minnesota game, they only have 3 more. So if they come out with the first 4 wins, you have to say they're going to win 2 of the 3 games that they should win. And Indiana's been a struggle for this team. So if you get into the Northwestern, they come in with questions after a season that was kind of a limbo last year. They lost to Illinois State 9-7. They lost to Western Michigan. And then they really picked it up and ended up 7-6 with a bowl win.
Well, you can't say Western Michigan's a tough loss to have last season. They were a fantastic team last year. But I do see your point. They are very similar to Maryland in terms of football programs. In fact, they may be the closest Maryland match in the Big Ten. Mason, I know, thinks it's Indiana, but I think they're pretty close.
Well, after they lost the first 2 games, they beat Duke, Iowa, Michigan State, Indiana, Purdue, and finished just like the Terps, having to win their last game, which they beat Illinois. So they play on the easier side of the Big Ten, and this year they're looking pretty good. They have Justin Jackson at running back, who ran for 1,500 yards, but then the biggest question on the offensive side of the ball is their line, so it's going to be a big chance for the Terps D-line to stop a good running back.
Now, Maryland's defensive line is like a tale of 2 teams almost. When they play teams that are worse than them, per se, they really play well. But when they play teams better than them, or sometimes level with them, they really seem to struggle. So I don't know if that's going to continue this year, but it may be something that Maryland can really expose in this game.
Well, this game, in my mind, is going to be a lot about getting the linebackers to a spot where they can run downhill and make the direct tackle on a really good running back. And on the other side, they have Clayton Thorson, who is seen as a really solid quarterback, but he lost his biggest playmaker in Austin Carr, who was a consensus All-Big Ten wide receiver, getting over 1,000 yards. So there's some question marks for this team, just like there is for every team at this time of the year.
Well, what do you think of their defense? Can they stop Ty Johnson and Maryland's running game? Because the Maryland run game really seems to be the team's lifeblood this season.
Well, this is going to be their deepest spot this year. They're actually looking at running an interesting formation, being the 4-2-5, where they have 4 defensive linemen, 2 linebackers, and 5 defensive backs. And Coach Fitzgerald over at Northwestern said that that's their deepest spot on the team, and they have to identify their 11 best guys because they just have so many guys that are going to contribute at that spot.
See, that's something that concerns me, because I keep saying Maryland's running game isn't everything on offense. With Ty Johnson and Lorenzo Harrison being the leads, they just need to get those guys going, or their offense seems to have no punch. So if the Northwestern defense turns out to be good this year, this game could be a problem for us.
Well, they have veteran guys, and they're 2 or 3 deep everywhere on the defensive line, but they also have veteran guys like Tyler Lanster and Jordan Thompson, who have been there for years, building up muscle, as we said with the Maryland linemen. That seems to be coming this year. But these guys have been in this program for years now, and that's what Northwestern is based on, getting freshmen and developing them to play in their junior, redshirt, and senior years.
I know Northwestern has a great speed rush, and I hope Maryland's been able to handle that well throughout DJ Durkin's short tenure here. So I think we're going to win this game. That's what it boils down to. I think it can be close. I see this in my version of Maryland football season. We're 2-3 at this moment. This is a huge swing game for us. I have us winning this game 31-21 at Byrd Stadium.
Well, I see this as the question of this game being, how will the Northwestern offensive line perform against the Maryland D-line? And how will Northwestern's speed rush type go against Maryland's speed run type? So that could be an interesting question for this game. I also have the Terps taking it on a last-second Matt Shinsky field goal, because that's who I predict to be the Maryland starting kicker this year. 24-21 in Byrd Stadium, taking the Terps in my prediction to 5-1.
You have an optimistic prediction, but you always have. So we have a little bit of extra time here. So we're going to brush on one of my all-time favorite Maryland sports, a rather obscure one, Maryland soccer.
Well, if you're not heading down to Austin, Texas for the Maryland-Texas game like the TerpTalk family is, Maryland will play UCLA at Ludwig Field Friday night, September 1st. And Fridays at Ludwig are always the best. The Terps are expecting yet another record crowd, and they seem to break the record crowd number every single year.
Maryland soccer is one of the best experiences in Maryland athletics. It may be the best. I don't remember the old Coalfield House. That's how young the Young Terp podcast is. But I've been told it's like old Coalfield House on steroids. There's just so much energy and fun going on at Ludwig Field during a big game. So, seriously, if you're not going to Austin, Texas, check out this game. It should be really fun. Maryland's number 6 this season. UCLA is a soccer powerhouse. It just should be a great game.
Well, Ludwig Field just has that small stadium environment that sports fans love so much. And the Terps, Gordon Wild, who was the striker for the Terps, is up for the soccer Heisman Trophy.
The last Terp to win the Mac Hermann Trophy, as it's known, was Patrick Mullins, one of the great Maryland soccer players of all time, plays for the DC United now. He was one of my all-time favorites. He had probably my all-time favorite TV call of all time when Maryland beat North Carolina back in ACC days. Mason, do you remember what it is?
Well, there's a long-time TerpTalk story from that we were at that game, and it was just dumping rain on Ludwig Field, and they went out during halftime and started poking holes in the field so the water would go into it, and we decided to leave once Wayne, who was on this podcast earlier, had a leak in his shoe. That's how much rain was going down, and we got home just in time for the game to end in its second overtime, and the call was, Mullins, it's over, and all the North Carolina players just fell on the ground. Like, they were devastated, and Maryland just went crazy.
Yeah, that was a 1-2 game, Maryland-North Carolina. Maryland is a great soccer program. It's up there with lacrosse as maybe our best program. It's just so much fun to go out to these games. So, really, if you can, go out to see them.
So, also, if you go out, a few years ago, the student section at Ludwig Field actually broke. It was the old bleachers that they used, on the top of the student section at Bird Stadium, and they were playing Duke once and was so overfilled that the section literally caved. Nobody got hurt, but that's just how crazy these games are. And that will do it for this week's Young Terp podcast, presented by Viener Consulting. Remember to check out all the TerpTalk platforms on TerpTalk.com. Thanks for listening.
I can make your hands